because I want to go in a different direction. Um, and I will talk about something that Jordan Peterson didn't mention, but to me is the key to this story. And I want to talk back or return to our last holiday of Thanksgiving, which to me is one of the most important holidays of our year. And it also kind of gets into the thinking about worshiping, is that we're being thankful and we're being humble. But the other key I want to make is that we're a family. We get together as family, and by God, for one day anyway, we get along. I've got some cousins in Southern California that are conservative, but we talk from time to time, and we have the discipline not to talk politics. But to me, it's the power of a name. Giving something a name gives it power. And the thing is, we are one family, all of humanity. But we go back to a couple of apes on a limb of a tree or whatever, and one guy's name was Ralph or whatever, but he realized he could touch his finger to his thumb or whatever, and he realized that he could pick berries, and so he could make a sharp stick and kill animals, and discovered fire and started cooking things, and he advanced. But as my understanding is, the DNA between us and the apes is practically identical. That through the luck of whatever, being Ralph or something, we have advanced. But to my point, it seems to me that we have to talk about all this stuff of God and the scriptures and Jesus and Muhammad with regard to today. And I think it's a healthy way to look at it, that we have developed into two different peoples, Islam and one side, and Christianity and Judaism on the other side. And one of the biggest conflicts, although it's, think Middle Eastern versus Europe or whatever, but I understand the largest Muslim country is Indonesia. Go figure that. And of course, my wonderful theory kind of omits things like Asia and Africa. But to me, we give an ancestor a name, Abraham. We all worship the God of Abraham. And you think, well, the story first, well, the kid Hagar and her son, I think it was her son Ishmael, kick him out of the desert. Well, that would be the end of the story. But it's actually the way I heard the story several years ago. They were wandering the desert, hungry and thirsty, and that they struck a rock, and the rock split open, and water came forth. And to me, it's a little less believable that they wandered into a, what you call the town, the desert that has a pond or whatever. But they did survive. God was looking after them. They are chosen people. And not only between Islam and Christianity and Judaism, but between liberals and conservatives today. We have all these terrible, deep divisions. And to me, what we're called to do today is remember the name of Abraham. That we have to start talking to each other, and we have to learn how to live together and stop killing each other in little minor things like today. And that's the news from Lake Wobegon. Thank you.
Yeah, that question was a bit in different places. Let's see if I can try to bring something. Recently I've dived into oxytocin, and there's a lot of research on how oxytocin was the cuddle drug and how it links into empathy. But the flip side of oxytocin, which some people have covered, like Sapolsky and evolutionary psychologists, is that it also increases otherism. It increases tribalism. And so this desire for everyone to be in harmony and not be violent increases rejecting of foreigners. It increases separate camps. And I'd add the angle that if you don't allow conflict, you don't give a medium for people to have supervised or civil conflict, which social media, I'd argue, doesn't have any gatekeepers, then that increases rejection. So if you don't have people where you can just wrestle with other people that are slightly different so you can get comfortable with them, then you naturally have your oxytocin disgust reflex, and you say, they're others. And one of the common othering is this sort of altruistic hive. Everyone needs to love everybody. Let's hate hatred, or let's reject hatred. Let's reject violence. Let's reject human nature. It's under the guise of, oh, I'm the higher ground. But what skin do you have in the game? Where have you sacrificed to prove your genuine love for society? Where have you put something on the line where you're giving up your sense of self? Where are you practicing your devotion and sacrifice? I don't advertise this in my other groups sometimes, but I've been challenged, like, I'm doing this self-gratifying. But behind the scenes, I'm volunteering, I'm hanging out with cancer patients, I'm running bereavement groups, totally of little personal ego gratification, but I'm getting to learn by being in front of other people's collapse. So that's my gift of being in front of other people's collapse, is that that's a natural, humbling, ego crumbling mechanism of sacrifice that helps me expand my sense of non-identity self. Where you can just get into a slogan political campaign of, oh, let's make everyone love everybody. That's actually potentially amplifying oxytocin, making you other people who don't follow that same sort of altruistic exceptionalism, whatever mindset. I don't know if that was directly questioning.
No, it's an excellent answer, because essentially you just pointed out something that even the most lovey-dovey person has to create another. There has to be another, right? Something to be hated, something to be fought against. And it's like, well, who do we fight? Like, well, the people that hate us, or the people that hate, or the don't tolerate the intolerant, right? Like, and it's like, well, that sounds great on paper. Who defines what that group is always the concern, right? Who defines who's the person that hates? Who defines the person that's intolerant according to whose measure? But there has to be that creation. Anytime you create a category, you also create an exclusion of that category by definition.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of follow up on Dee's point that, yeah, there's always going to be conflict between, these others and us or whatever. But I'm just going to make a plea that we find peaceful, nonviolent, not going to war, ways to stand in for that conflict. And sports comes to mind. We could do 3 hours on Kansas State, or the Olympics. But the thing is, 52 Living Ideas last Wednesday night, Mike talked about chess. And, it's a little square board, 64 squares, and these pieces, black pieces, white pieces, different, rooks, bishops, kings, queen, pawns, move around this board. We're talking about a match for 6 hours, and the intensity. And it's actually fighting a war on this little wooden board. But afterwards, you shake hands. No one gets killed. So I'm just saying we've got to find ways to diffuse the conflict. Anyway, thanks for a great discussion today, Roger.
No, thank you. And I think you have a great point. I also think just being able to articulate your own ideas and also make other people feel heard, I think is one of the biggest things for diffusing conflict.
Okay, I can play with the non-violent angle, or non-blood violent. Right after we stopped, Peterson quoted a philosopher of science called Karl Popper. And then one of his conclusions was, the purpose of thinking is to let your thoughts die instead of you. And then I would link that to also Steelman. So, how much do people allow violent thought conflict? How much do you allow your most precious beliefs to be murdered by someone else? Do we have engaged conversations where people are allowed to present their idea and let it get murderized by somebody else? to really test your beliefs and your assumptions? Or do you just throw them out in a way that they're abstract enough so you don't really put any skin in the game, you don't put any sacrifice behind your ideas? So you don't test them out. So then when they aren't tested out, it's easy to get really attached to your ideas and your identity and your ego gratification. And then you go head to head with a psychopath or a narcissist who just totally gaslights you and destroyed your whole sense of being because you've created this false attachment to your belief system and all these assumptions you didn't really dig up because you didn't put it out into the public sphere to get battled, to get destroyed by reasonable people. And then you end up getting destroyed by someone who's higher up or someone who uses unfair tactics, fighting this illusionary battle of saving the world, but not really using thoughts to die so people don't have to physically do violence. So we have to have violence somewhere. So if you don't want blood violence, then you have to do it psychologically through sport, something else. Otherwise, it will go to physical blows.